she often has these incredible spats, doesn't she? And normally in public, actually, to be fair. I suppose at least she did it in a quasi-private meeting to begin with. But she likes a fight, and I'm not sure whether she actually, when she goes into these fights, thinks about what will be happening in 2 weeks' time with the spat that she started, how it's going to escalate, what it's going to do for her. But you look at the fight she had with the fight she had over the post office, for instance, and where that ended up. I'm not sure that these things are necessarily something that she sits down and thinks, how is this going to affect me? What is the effect in the party? She's just quite scrappy, I think. But I think the idea that it wasn't going to leak is for the birds.
Labour won a landslide victory last week, and since then, Keir Starmer's been brushing shoulders with world leaders, embattled world leaders, if we're honest. England are in the final of the Euros. GDP is up. We've been asking this morning, is it luck or good judgment? Do you make your own luck? Is it a good thing to be a lucky general? We've just been talking about Napoleon. Is that what Keir Starmer, maybe Gareth Southgate, is showing? We can talk now on the political side to Isabel Hardman, assistant editor at The Spectator. Morning, Isabel.
Good morning.
Before we talk about the Tories' lack of luck and indeed other problems, just can you reflect on your view of Keir Starmer that this has been a long time coming. It's been 14 years coming. He has seemed to take advantage of the situation by being competent and being ready to go. But there is a whiff of luck around him. Is that fair, do you think?
Well, I mean, it's early days, isn't it? It's only a week since polling day, and I think this could still be a very short honeymoon period, if it is even that. And I think your point about him, benefiting from looking competent is really the important thing, because he benefits from the mistakes of his predecessors. So if Rishi Sunak had gone for an autumn election, and this is the argument that lots of ex-Tory MPs have been making to me this morning, then perhaps he would have seen better economic growth figures like we've seen this morning, which Rachel Reeves has now not taken credit for, but has been able to say this is the start of a decade of renewal. And it might be that actually there has been some activity in anticipation of a Labour government, but really it's actually just that Rishi Sunak decided to go early before he was going to get the credit for any economic recovery,
which looks more baffling. Which looks more baffling as the weeks go on, doesn't it?
Quite. And I think that's one of the issues within the Conservative Party at the moment, is that they are being led by someone, as an interim measure, who they're still very cross with. So that's, I think, having a bearing on their general temperament.
We had Jonathan Powell on, and a couple of people have said to us on this programme and in other conversations that actually Starmer is more policy prepared than they were in 97. Actually, that's one example of not luck, and this question of not just simply being a bit more competent. He knows he has to hit the ground running, and he's sort of, at least in the first week, showing that he's trying to do that. Now, your point's good. It's only been a week, and who knows where it goes after that. But he's given the appearance of it very successfully, hasn't he?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with that point by Jonathan Powell. If you compare where Labour was on key areas, even education and the NHS, which were key parts of the 1997 election campaign, they didn't actually have a policy. I mean, that was something that Tony Blair said to Alan Milburn when he made him a junior health minister in 97. We don't have a health policy. And when I interviewed him for my book on the NHS, which is in all good bookshops, he said to me that he hadn't really thought about health before the 1997 election. Now, compare that to Keir Starmer, who has not only got the right people in the Secretary of State positions to be delivering reform agenda, but who's actually spent about a year talking about the direction he wants to go in, and has also had, this Institute for Government training for his shadow ministers when they're in opposition to prepare them for the reality of being in a department. I think they've been much more prepared and much more, I think, aware of the pitfalls ahead of them once they go into government.
John has just got in touch to say Starmer made his luck when he employed Sue Gray to run his office. You're closer to this type of thing than we are. Sue Gray, of course, became this important figure around Partygate, a kind of laughable tagline for anyone trying to avoid a question for about what felt like 6 months, but is seen as this doer, this someone who can get a grip of things. Is that fair? Is it when someone says, like John, that's a massive factor in this, having someone like Sue Gray? Is that true, or is that just a myth?
No, it is absolutely true. She knows how to get things done. She knows how to get people to do what she wants them to do. But as with all of these things, what may start out as your strength can often end up being your flaw. So there's a lot of resentment within Keir Starmer's team towards Sue Gray, towards other people. I'd say it's not a particularly united top team. And obviously at the moment, I think there's a combination of them. Oh no, definitely. There's we did have this briefing, I think particularly over Palestine, where there was a feeling that Gray was getting more involved in the sort of policy side of things than she should have been, a resentment from other members of that top team. And I think there's a combination at the moment of them obviously being incredibly happy that they've just won the election and also absolutely exhausted after that campaign. But I think once we get to the winter, we may actually start to see there being problems with the Sue show that has got them going in such an impressive way to begin with.
That's really interesting. Obviously, compared to the Tories, Labour look like they're all just sitting peeling grapes and throwing them into each other's mouths. It really is astonishing what is going on with Kemi Badenoch and Suella Braverman. There's an image for you, Isabel. You can keep that one. What do you think? How embarrassing is this? Because do you think Kemi Badenoch wanted Steve Swinford to write that story, which showed how robust she was being, how she was having a go at Rishi Sunak and Suella Braverman? And how bad is this type of spat?
Yeah, I mean, I just mentioned the Sue show. This is more like the sort of dinner parties in Married at First Sight Australia, where they will just yell at each other for 4 hours. I'm sure you would watch that every night, Stig. But yeah, I mean, Kemi being surprised that a shadow cabinet meeting got briefed. I mean, they've basically been a live blog for the past 5 years. They've been completely unconfidential, and so the idea that you'd say anything in a shadow cabinet meeting after an election defeat and it not end up in the hands of somebody like Steve is just it's improbable.
So she knew it. So the question about that is, if that's the case, then she did it for a reason. Either she was just angry and couldn't help herself, or actually she wants to layer up Suella Braverman. She wants to tear down Rishi Sunak, and she presumably wants to stake her claim to being the plain talking person who's going to fix this Tory party.
I mean, I think that's interesting, whether Kemi is that strategic, because she often has these incredible spats, doesn't she? And normally in public, actually, to be fair. I suppose at least she did it in a quasi-private meeting to begin with. But she likes the fight, and I'm not sure whether she actually, when she goes into these fights, thinks about what will be happening in 2 weeks' time with the spat that she started, how it's going to escalate, what it's going to do for her. But you look at the fight she had with the fight she had over the post office, for instance, and where that ended up. I'm not sure that these things are necessarily something that she sits down and thinks, how is this going to affect me? What is the effect in the party? She's just quite scrappy, I think. But I think the idea that it wasn't going to leak is for the birds.
And just finally, do you have any more of a sense of the direction the Tory party is going to go in? I mean, it's all at this stage where they're presumably still trying to work it out. Andy Street had an intervention this morning. Ben Houchen has been on Times Radio as well, talking about it. They're the sort of senior, well, Ben Houchen's the senior elected figure, I suppose, in the party. Do you get a sense of any direction that could be agreed upon, or are we still in the everyone pointing each other and shouting stage?
I think there's a mixture of people who are pointing and shouting, and then the rest of, what's left of the parliamentary party, who I think are actually kind of a bit numb with grief and who haven't really worked out what they're going to do and how to adjust to how the party, feels. Even the psychological impact of sitting on the other side of the House of Commons in a much reduced group, is huge, and they're having to do that awful thing where they're bumping into colleagues who lost, who are carrying boxes, and so the ones who I have spoken to who aren't leadership contenders are actually quite quiet and downbeat and are trying to work out where to go next, as opposed to all this sort of sounding off that you're getting from 5 or 6 people.
Yeah, and they probably should be that. That's exactly maybe what people want to see, a bit of humility and a bit of recognition. They got a kicking and there's a reason for that. Isabel, this story's not going to go quiet. None of them are. This politics is going to be as lively as ever before. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
That's Isabel Hardman, the assistant editor at The Spectator.